Good afternoon. Welcome, everybody, to today's presentation on New York paid family leave. Before we get started, I do want to let everybody know that you are on mute to reduce the level of background noise due to this presentation being recorded. It will be available later on, probably either tomorrow or early next week, to be viewed at your leisure via YouTube link. And also, I do want to let everybody know that due to the size of the presentation and the length of time that it might take to get through all of the information, we won't likely be fielding questions during the presentation. However, if you look at the dashboard, there is a question field that I highly encourage everybody to open up and ask as many questions as you have. They will be forwarded to today's presenter. And what we'll do is we'll compile a list of FAQs and send the responses out to all participants that are in attendance today. So if you do have any questions, please feel free at any time. I highly encourage you to ask any and all, and we will get answers for you in a fairly timely manner. Additionally, if you look at the dashboard, you'll see a handout section that says 5 of 5. There is a PDF of today's presentation, as well as 4 additional forms that are being provided to you to use either as examples or a guide to ask additional questions. So I highly encourage you to view or print those off and use them to your benefit. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Elizabeth Artiles. She is our presenter today. Elizabeth, have a great presentation.
Great, thank you, Todd. So good afternoon, everyone. Today we're here to talk about New York paid family leave. I'm going to start by just adding the disclaimer, so please note that this is a complex and rapidly changing area. This presentation addresses a variety of subjects in a general way, and this presentation should not be relied on as legal, insurance, tax, or operational advice. So what we're going to cover today, we are going to do an overview of the New York paid family leave, including eligibility and claims process, as well as what the employer responsibilities are. And then towards the end of the presentation, we're going to cover how Oasis is positioned to help our PEO clients comply with the new law. So what is it? Paid family leave starts January 1st, 2018, and it provides job-protected paid leave to employees that need to bond with newly born, adopted, or fostered children, to care for a family member with a serious health condition, or to relieve family pressures when someone is called to active military service. So who is the covered employer? So most private employers with 1 or more employees working in New York who are required to provide disability benefits, and this includes employees working from both either a New York location or employees that are working from home in New York. So for New York paid family leave, bonding with the child. So the parent may take paid family leave during the first 12 months following birth, adoption, or fostering of a child. It includes children born, fostered, or adopted in 2017, as long as still within the first 12 months. So what does this mean? This actually means is that you have an employee that had a new child earlier this year. Say, for example, someone gave birth to a new child in October. They'd actually be eligible for the benefit effective, starting as early as January 1st. So it's important to note that, even though the deductions, we're planning to start those now January 1st, you might have employees that are already eligible for this benefit. And then spouses with different employers are both eligible at the same time. So spouse with the same employer can be denied, though, if they've both asked for the same period of time off. So if you have, couples that are both eligible, again, there might be a situation that they're both eligible at the same time, and again, you do have the option to deny it to one, at least while the one is out, they cannot take it both at the same time. It's also for family care, so you can use it to care for a family member for a serious health condition. That includes illness, injury, impairment, or physical or mental condition that involves inpatient care in a hospital, hospice, or residential health care facility, or continuing treatment or supervision by a healthcare provider. For family care, now family members, this is a lot different than FMLA, where the scope of which family members are include not only spouses, but also domestic partners, children and stepchildren, parents and step-parents, parents-in-law, grandparents, and grandchildren. And one thing to note regarding children, so with FMLA, there is an age limit for children. With this New York paid family leave, there actually is no age limit for the children. So you could have an older employee, that has a 40-year-old family member that they need to care for, and they're actually eligible. It's also eligible for active military duty deployment. So it's available when a spouse, a domestic partner, child, or parent of the employee is on active military duty abroad or has been notified of an impending call or order of active military duty abroad. And employees can take leave to help out with obligations that arise out of the call to duty. So how does it work? So New York paid family leave is to be added to the employer's existing New York disability benefits policy. It is funded by employee payroll contributions, and eligible employees are guaranteed paid time off for 8 weeks starting in 2018, and it is going to increase until we get to the year 2021. And it does provide for job protection upon return from paid family leave, and there's also a stipulation of continuation of health insurance. The maximum employee contribution in 2018 is going to be 0.126% of employees' weekly wage. It is capped at 0.126% of the annualized New York State average weekly wage. So for this year, the maximum per week will be $1.65, and the maximum per year that can be deducted is $85.56 per year. And again, it's based on the employee's weekly earnings. So for example, an employee that's earning $31,200 a year or $600 a week is going to pay 76 cents per week for this benefit. So here's an overview of the employee benefits and what's available. So starting in 2018, there are 8 weeks available. It's going to be a maximum percentage of the employee average weekly wage up to 50%. It is capped at the percentage of the New York State average weekly wage. It is going to increase for this year. The benefit's capped at $652.96 based on the current state average weekly wage of $1,305.92. And as you can see here, as each year progresses, in 2019, it will be available for 10 weeks at 55%. In 2020, it's going to be available also for 10 weeks, but an increased maximum of 60%. And then in 2021, the full benefit's going to be available for 12 weeks, and that's at 67%. So for the employee benefits, the paid family leave benefits examples, here are just some examples of weekly wages and what the weekly paid family leave benefit will be in 2018. So if you've got someone making $600 a week, their maximum benefit's going to be $300. For someone making $1,000 a week, their maximum benefit's going to be $500. And then for someone making $2,000 per week, their maximum is going to be $652.96. And again, as a reminder, that's because the benefit is capped at 50% of the New York State average weekly wage, which, so that amount, again, if they're over that amount, it's going to be that maximum of $652.96. So who's eligible? So with eligibility for paid family leave, it's all employees who have a regular work schedule of 20 or more hours per week after 26 consecutive weeks of employment. Now, when someone is newly hired, if it is expected that they're going to be full-time and that they're going to work over 20 hours for more than 26 weeks, then they're actually going to start paying for the benefit upon hire. With this new law, you're not waiting until they become eligible before you start deducting them for the benefit. Also, employees with a regular work schedule of less than 20 hours per week are also eligible, as long as they've worked 175 days in the year. This is not consecutive. And then employees whose regular work schedules are temporary or seasonal may opt out of the paid family leave, and we'll go into a little bit more detail a little bit later in the presentation to talk about opting out. So employees that are not expected to work for their employer for the minimum amount of time to be required to be eligible, they may opt out. So for example, if you're hiring someone as a temporary employee that you're only going to hire them for 2 months, even though they're full-time, they would never be eligible because they're only working for you for 2 months. Now, it is up to the employee to opt out, and they would have to submit an opt-out waiver. So again, that paid family leave waiver is only for employees scheduled to work the 20-plus hours, but not 26 consecutive weeks, or any employees that are scheduled to work less than 20 hours and are not expected to work 175 days in a 52 consecutive week period. Now, with opting out, the waiver is optional and it is revocable. So an employer cannot force an employee to opt out. The employee has to make that decision. They may decide to revoke their waiver later on, even if their schedule does not change. But if the waiver is revoked by either the employee, or because they have a change in work schedule, the employer may take retroactive deductions for the period of time the employee was covered by the waiver. And then this time counts towards the eligibility for paid family leave. So again, if you have someone, for example, that, you hired them, they were going to be temp for 2 months, and then you change their status to full-time, you decide to hire them on full-time, and they submitted a waiver to opt out because when they were hired, they weren't expected to ever be eligible. Now that they've had this change in work schedule, then that waiver does need to be revoked, and that person would be charged for the deductions back to when they were originally hired. So revoking a waiver within 8 weeks of any change in regular work schedule that would make the employee eligible. Again, the waiver would be revoked. The employee is obliged to begin contributing, and it does include retroactive amounts due from the date of hire. There is an employee notification required. So, for example, if you change someone's work schedule and now, that waiver needs to be revoked, the employee does need to be notified. The employer is required to keep copies of fully executed waivers on file as long as the employee remains in employment. So for out-of-state, so family leave, it is a benefit for people who work in New York. So for employees it includes employees working from their home in New York. If the employee is required to travel occasionally into New York to perform duties, they might not be considered New York State employee unless their employment is based in the state. And it also does not include employees who live in New York but work outside of New York. So if you have employees, maybe they live in New York but they work in New Jersey or some of the outlier states, then they would not be included. So let's talk a little bit now about the claim procedure. So employees do need to provide their employer with a 30-day advance notice. If the event was not foreseeable, the employee must notify their employer as soon as practical. The employee is to complete a PFL-1 form, and that form is really what that is the request for paid family leave. And with that form, what the employee is going to do is they're going to fill out their portion and they're going to hand it to their employer. And there are 2 pages that need to be completed by the employer. And we'll go over that also a little bit later in the presentation, because you do want to make yourself familiar with that form. There is a requirement that the employer return the form to the employee within 3 days, and that's 3 business days. So there is a very tight and quick turnaround time from the time that the employee actually submits the form. and the time that the employer needs to get that back to the employee. So that request for paid family leave, it's very important that you familiarize yourself with the employer information portion, and be able to get that back to that employee back within 3 days. Now, other than completing that portion of the form and getting it back to the employee, from that point on, it's the employee's responsibility to complete the process and get that completed form and all the required documentation back to the insurance carrier. So, the employee is going to complete the form, and then depending on what type of leave, there's whether it's for bonding, whether it's for care of a family member, or if it's for a military qualifying event, then they're going to fill out the particular form. Now, whenever it's in reference to caring of a family member, there is a release that they have to fill out and give that to their healthcare provider, and they also have to fill out an additional form, which is the PFL-4, which is the healthcare provider certification for care of a family member. So again, it's still the responsibility of the employee, and they would again get that to the provider and have them fill that out as well. But again, ultimately, it's the employee that's responsible. Once you give them back the form within 3 days, it's their responsibility to fill out the rest of the forms and get that, in this case, to a healthcare provider, if it's regarding to care of a family member, or back to the insurance company. Now, once the employee is going to send the completed PFL forms and the supporting documentation to the insurance carrier. Once the insurance carrier receives it, they're going to have 18 days to either accept or deny the claim. And then if the claim is approved, then that employee will receive payment directly from the carrier for any approved claims. Now, I indicated that there is also documentation that's going to be required from the employee. And again, this is something that it's an employee responsibility. But for childbirth, the birth mother has to submit a birth certificate or documentation of pregnancy or birth from a healthcare provider. If it's a second parent, they must submit a birth certificate naming them as a parent. If they don't have that available, it can be a voluntary acknowledgement of paternity or a court order naming them as the parent. For foster care, the employee needs to provide a letter of placement issued by the county or city department of social services or the local voluntary agency. Again, if the second parent is not named, a copy of the document plus a document verifying the relation to the parent named in the foster care placement is going to be needed. For adoption, they need to provide the court document finalizing adoption, the document showing that the adoption process is underway for paid family leave before completion of adoption, the signed statement from an attorney, adoption agency, or adoption-related social service provider. And again, if that second parent is not named, they have to again show that documentation with proof of the relationship with the parent named in the adoption. For serious health condition, there's a medical certification that needs to be completed by the care recipient's healthcare provider, and there's an authorization for personal health disclosure form that needs to be completed by the care recipient. And finally, for active military deployment, they'll need to provide the certification or U.S. Department of Labor certificate of qualifying exigency for military family leave. And these forms include the military documentation of the family member's deployment or impending deployment and the documentation of the reason for leave. Now, all of this information is included with the forms that we will both have on our employee services website, but also on the New York Paid Family Leave website as well. So anything that's required is going to be completed in the forms that is going to be included in the forms that they need to complete. Now, as far as employer responsibilities, you are responsible for providing disability paid family leave coverage to eligible employees. The employees are entitled to be reinstated to the same or comparable job upon return from family leave, so it is a protected leave. And then failure to reinstate employees to their same or comparable job may leave employers exposed to discrimination or retaliation claims. So just make sure you realize this is a protected leave, and so employees are entitled to be reinstated. So it's similar to FMLA. They have that same job protection. They also must continue the employee's health insurance while they're out on paid family leave. So again, similar to FMLA, employees are required to keep their health insurance while they're out. Now, employers may require that employees continue to pay their health premium contributions while they're out. But again, it is something that, you cannot term their health benefits while they're out on that leave unless, there's an issue with the employee paying their premiums. Now, employers do need to ensure that their employees are aware of the paid family leave program and that your organizational policies do comply with the law. And we'll talk about this a little later, but Oasis will be sending out, we're in the process of sending out notifications to employees that work in New York to make sure they're notified of this new law coming up and giving them the information that they need. And then also employers must display a poster regarding paid family leave coverage in their place of business, similar to the New York State disability. So and we'll talk a little bit about that in a couple more slides. Now, the employer must complete their request for paid family leave. So that PFL-1 form that I talked about earlier, that request for paid family leave, it's Part B of the form, and again, it does need to be returned back to the employee within 3 business days. So, that's really big. It's a very short window. You only have 3 business days to get that back to them. So it's very important that anyone in your organization that's going to be responsible for filling out this form, that they become familiar with the form, and that they know that there is a fast turnaround here. And then one other thing I want to point out, that it is important that you continue to follow the established leave notification process with Oasis. So again, you still need to follow the same process as you're currently for PEO clients that you're going through right now as well. So under the New York Paid Family Leave, employees are still required to submit a request for leave with their employer. So once the employee submits the leave request, employer must submit a copy of the leave along with the employer leave return form to the HR Service Center at hrservicecenter@oasisadvantage.com. So again, that's for all the Oasis PEO clients. I know we have other types of clients that are on the line as well. So if you're an Oasis PEO client, again, you still need to report your leave, submit that to the HR Service Center. And then the leave team will process the leave and notify the employee of the approval of their leave. You also want to contact, if you're an employer who is now covered by New York Paid Family Leave, you should contact your Oasis relationship manager to discuss specific action steps. So you want to contact your Oasis relationship manager about the specific process, including the employee application for leave of absence, the employer leave return form, and then Oasis serving as your paid family leave administrator. So again, we will serve as your leave administrator. Your relationship manager will review the various steps involved with initiating and approving the leave request under the new law. And the leave forms must be completed and submitted to the Oasis HR Service Center as you would any other FMLA or leave request that need processing. So now I wanted to go over, that request for paid family leave. Again, there are instructions on the form itself that kind of guide you through the process and what information that you need to provide. So you will see that on the form, and that form is actually added as one of the handouts in today's presentation. So you can download that. Again, it's the same form that's available on the New York Paid Family Leave website, but we have that for your convenience. It is included with this presentation. So once the employee fills out their portion of this form, again, just make sure that you are familiar with this form so that when you receive this form, from your employees that you already know what to do with it and what's required. So, this is part of the form. It is Part B, the employer information. It includes your legal, the company legal name and mailing address. It needs to include the employer FEIN number and your standard industrial classification code, or SIC code. The name of the person that's going to be responsible to answer any questions that might arise, the employer's contact telephone number, and a contact email address. Continuing with the same form, they're going to want to know what the employee's date of hire is, the employee's occupation codes, and they do include a link. So if you look at the form, there is a link to where you can find the codes for this section, so it is available there, and it's directly on the form. They also require that you enter the last 8 weeks of gross wages for the employee and calculate the average gross weekly wage amount. And so again, all of that information and even instructions on that is included in the document. And then whether or not the employee will receive full wages while they're out on paid family leave. So, if you've got someone that, maybe you have a policy where you're actually going to pay them while they're out on paid family leave and you're going to pay their full wages. If you indicate yes here, then the insurance carrier, instead of, if the claim is approved, instead of providing the employee with the benefit, they would provide you with the benefit since you're paying the employee in full while they're out. And then the continued, still same form. This is the next page of the form where they're going to want to know as far as, did this employee take leave earlier during the year or in the preceding 52 weeks. They're also going to want to know the total number of weeks and dates taken, and whether or not the employee is taking FMLA leave concurrently with paid family leave. So these are the questions that you're going to be asked on the form. The last portion of the second page has to do with the insurance carrier information. So again, you should find that information is going to be whether or not you have the Oasis Aetna disability and paid family leave policy or you have your own. You're going to find that information on the notice that you have that you provide to the employee. So that insurance carrier's information is going to be on there, as well as the carrier's telephone number and the policy number. And then again, there's the, you have to declare and signature and affirming that this employee is actually eligible, and then sign, date, and put your title on the form. And again, as a reminder, this form does need to be returned back to the employee within 3 days. So how can Oasis help? So, so for clients on the Oasis Aetna workers' comp disability DB-120 policy, that New York paid family leave has already been added to the existing Aetna New York workers' comp disability policy. And you do need to provide the required notice of compliance for posting. So there's also the processing of employee payroll contributions and draft policies that are available to update employee handbooks. So again, Oasis does offer a policy through Aetna that is offered to most of our PEO clients. So if you're a client that has been issued a New York workers' comp disability policy through Oasis, then again, that New York paid family leave has already been added. For clients with this policy, we are in the process of uploading the New York paid family leave notice to employees on both the client services website and the employee services website. So, but as the worksite employer, you're still responsible for posting the notice at your worksite location and to forward a copy to your employees that work from home in New York. So very similar to how we process the disability, where we provide you with that certificate and let you know you've got to post this at your physical New York locations. But also, again, that reminder that if you have an employee that's working from New York from home, you need to forward that to them as well. We're also going to process the employee deductions based on the current 0.126% of the employee's weekly wage up to the $1.65 per week. And so for Oasis clients that have their own New York disability paid family leave policies, we're going to credit those employee deductions back to you through the invoicing process. And then again, if you need assistance in drafting policies to update your employee handbooks, then please reach out to your relationship manager, and they can assist you with that. Also, when it comes to processing the opt-out waivers and keeping completed waivers on file, so the employer is responsible to keep those waivers on file. So if you're ever asked to produce that waiver, you need to be able to produce it. Now, Oasis will keep a copy. If you forward that form to us, we will keep that on file. It also will be part of the employee onboarding. So as you have new employees that are hired, that form, the information and that form is going to be made available to them. So just make sure, like I said, that if they're filling that out, you want to make sure that you review it and then sign it and get that back to us. Now, clients receiving opt-out waivers prior to January 1st, what we want you to do, again, if you're an Oasis PEO client, you want to create a case and upload the form for your color team and add New York Paid Family Leave Waiver in the subject line. So if you've already, these forms are already out on the New York State website. So if you already have some opt-out waivers that an employee might have given you, if you review their information and they are truly eligible to opt out, then go ahead and, like I said, forward that form to us and do that through submitting a case to your color team. We'll also, now again, the forms are going to be available both through the Oasis Employee Services website and through the New York Paid Family Leave website. We are in the process of sending employee communications about New York Paid Family Leave through email and U.S. postal mail. But again, if you receive an opt-out waiver prior to January 1st, please submit a case and let us know so that we can make sure that we are not deducting the paid family leave for that employee if they're truly not eligible. We're also going to be periodically reviewing to check for possible waiver revocation. So what we're doing is on a periodic basis, we're going to review the employees in the New York location to check to see if, maybe they were on, currently on a waiver, but now we see that, they've had a status change to full time. And so where they had the waiver on file, now that would need to be revoked. So we'll assist with things like that. And then as a reminder, all the employee forms are going to be available on the Employee Services website. And again, a really good resource for New York Paid Family Leave is that the New York State Paid Family Leave website. There's a lot of information. You can refer your employees to that site. And it does have it broken down by, employee information, employer information, and then carrier information. So now I just wanted to share with you some of the other forms. This is the notice to employees. So again, if this is the notice that you're required to post at the location and also to provide to your employees that maybe work from home in New York. It has all the information they need, and on this form you'll actually see, you don't see it on this form, but you'll actually see the carrier information, name, address, phone number, and have all the information there. And then there's also the information as directly to the website, which is ny.gov/paid family leave. So again, if you haven't been to that website, it's a really good resource. They're also available by phone. And I can tell you, I have used that phone to call. They're pretty responsive. If you call and you have questions, sometimes they might not be able to answer your question right away. But the experience that I've had with them so far is that, usually they respond, 24 to 48 hours from when you call and have a question for them and they're not able to answer it right away. Now, there's also a statement of rights for paid family leave, and so this is also needs to be made available to the employees. Again, for Oasis PEO clients that are on the Aetna Oasis disability policy, this will be posted onto the Employee Services website And again, and it will have the carrier information on here as well. So again, it's important that the employees get these notifications and it's available for them. And I wanted to give a couple more, just a little bit more additional information. Again, that website is newyork.gov, paid family leave. You can also call them. They are available Monday through Friday from 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., and that is Eastern Standard Time. And you can contact your relationship manager as well. So, you know, with that, I think we actually might have a little bit of time to answer a couple of questions. So Todd, do you have some FAQs that maybe we can try to answer?
I've got one that is asking where you can find the SIC codes, the SIC codes.
Okay, if they actually load the form that was given, that is available in the handout, so if they go to the form, there's actually a link on that form. It's www.bls. Oh, I'm sorry, you're saying the SIC codes.
Yes.
Right? Okay, not the occupation codes. SIC codes, I'll include that in the FAQ that goes back, because there is, that is available, I believe, through the IRS, but we'll provide the link where they can get their SIC code.
Okay, next one is, would this apply to employers that currently does not offer benefits?
It's going to apply to any employer that is required to offer New York State disability. And that requirement, if you have one or more people working from New York, you're required to offer New York State disability. And so for most private employers, it's going to be for both New York disability and paid family leave. Now, the paid family leave is part of a rider that is to go together with the New York disability. So it's one policy, but it offers both New York disability and New York paid family leave. And the only exception is if you self-insure, but if you're going through a carrier, then both of those plans are included together.
Okay, then we have, let's see here. What if an employee who is a temp works for 26 weeks and then requests the leave, but the client cancels the assignment upon the employee's departure? What happens when the leave is over and there is no work as the client canceled the assignment? With temp work, the staffing agency doesn't get paid if the employee doesn't work.
I'm not sure what, so I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure. That might be a multiple. That one I'm going to leave for the FAQ we put together, because I think there's a couple of issues there that need to be addressed.
Right. Okay, the next one is, can an employee use available PTO time to complement their New York paid leave?
They can, but you cannot force someone to use any kind of, so unlike FMLA, they can't be required to take vacation and other PTO time concurrently with their paid family leave time, but they can choose to have it run concurrently with any vacation and PTO time to supplement paid family leave, but you can't force them, so they can't be required to do so. That's a good question.
Okay, the next one is, I'm going to throw the can at the front of it. Can current employees with the company, I guess that would be eligible for PFL as of 1 January 2018, if they've been employed for 26 weeks. So would the employees be eligible for PFL?
Employees are eligible for PFL starting January 1st. So, for example, if you have somebody that just had a child, say they had them in October, and actually anytime during the previous 52 weeks for the birth of a child, or for a newborn or someone placed in adoption. So if you have someone with that situation, let's say, for example, they had the baby in October, they're actually eligible, even though they haven't even started paying premiums yet towards the leave, they're actually eligible to request the leave for bonding starting January 1st. So you could have a scenario where you have employees that, in the past year have had a child or adopted a child or foster a child that could be eligible as early as January 1st for the benefit. As long as they meet the eligibility requirements for New York paid family leave, then they would be eligible. And just as a reminder, the eligibility requirements for paid family leave is, an employee that works 20 or more hours per week in a consecutive 26-week period. And then employees that work less than 20 hours a week are eligible after they've worked 175 days. And again, that's not consecutive within a 52-week period. I think I don't know if anybody's asked this, but something that kind of just to add to that, something that I've seen people ask all the time is, do full-time new hires start contributing right away, or do they have to wait until they become eligible for the benefit to start deducting? And the answer is all employees are required to start paying for the benefit starting January 1st upon hire. The only exception is if they're eligible for the waiver and the employee actually opts out and submits and is truly eligible for the opt-out. And then just one more thing to add to that I found kind of interesting is that employees don't need to satisfy the paid family leave requirements each year. So that means that if you have someone that, it was full-time and they were eligible, and then all of a sudden they're no longer, it sounds crazy, but they're no longer full-time and they no longer meet that criteria, I mean, they're going to be eligible to opt out, but once they satisfy the eligibility requirement once, then they continue to be eligible. I found that kind of strange, but that's what the regs say.
Okay, is this an annual benefit, or could it be done as a rolling calendar similar to FMLA?
The benefit for the first year is limited. So as we mentioned earlier, for the first year, it's going to be available for 8 weeks. So if they've used the 8 weeks in 2018, then they'd have to wait for the next year for them to be eligible for the 10 weeks. But they could have multiple events where, maybe they use 4 weeks for bonding with the child and another 4 weeks for taking care of a family member.
Okay, what if the employees only started on November 1, 2017?
Yeah, that kind of is what I talked about earlier, that they started November 1st, if they're full-time and, unless they meet the waiver requirement, they're going to start being deducted starting January 1st. Now, they're not going to be eligible right away. They have to meet the eligibility requirement to be eligible for the benefit. So for the new employees that, you're hiring them full-time, but, they just started December 1st, they actually have to pay into the New York Paid Family Leave starting January 1st, but until they meet that 26-week period, which is 6 months that they've been working for you, they wouldn't be eligible for the benefit.
Okay, we have, will the Oasis platform track employee eligibility for PFL?
We will. What we're doing is we're going to have a periodic report that is run to track to see if any of these people that have opted out because they weren't eligible are now actually should be eligible because they've had a change in status, or because maybe they were hired as, the intention was to hire them as full-time, but it turns out they're actually not, and they're not working periodically. So we will run reports to give us that information, and as we see people that that have opted out, that are now no longer available, we'll be able to provide that information.
Will Oasis automatically calculate and withhold the deduction through payroll?
Yes, we will. So we're already ready to, again, it's already set up where we will deduct it automatically from the employee. Again, it's that 0.126% of their weekly wage. There is a cap, so that will happen. For clients that don't have the Oasis Aetna Disability Paid Family Leave Plan, that will show up on our client's invoice, so that you'll receive that money and you'll be able to pay your carrier. And it'll show up as a credit on the invoice.
Okay, are there any additional questions that you would like to ask? If you think of anything after we're off this session, please feel free to email your RM, and they'll forward the question to all of our personnel that are kind of knowledgeable in that area. So if there's no other questions at this time, I want to thank you, Elizabeth, for an excellent presentation, and we'll give everybody about 14 minutes of their time back. So again, if you do have any questions that you think of after we're off of here, please feel free to get in touch with your relationship manager or the service center, and they will forward the questions to the appropriate people. One last call. Anything else before we log off? Okay. Well, Elizabeth, thank you for a wonderful presentation. We're going to give everybody about 13 minutes of their time back. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and close us out. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.